What is up, rock and rollers, future bands, and current bands, and music listeners, guys? This is the Tenacity Podcast, where we talk about all things rock and roll. I'm your host, Gavin, with my partner, Josh. Super excited to be here. Josh, how are you doing today, sir?
Absolutely. It's a beautiful day to talk about all things rock.
Absolutely. And today we've got a special episode for you guys. This is episode 2 of our podcast. We're super excited for this one because we're talking about a subject that's near and dear to our hearts. If you've been in the music industry or listened to music at any point in your life, what if music is a part of what you do in your daily routine, you've come across one thing that has shifted or maybe stayed the same throughout your life, and that is your favorite band. Obviously, there's so many bands out there, and if you were to ask anybody in any genre, any industry, you ask them what is your favorite band, they're never going to be able to give you one. Josh, could you give them one, just like off the top of your head? Like, if you were to say one, like,
I mean, it's so that question is just like it'd be similar to like what's your all-time favorite rock song, right? It's like, how can you answer just one? You want to keep going and going and going and going.
Exactly.
Now, obviously, you can give your list of your favorites, but just have to be forced to pick just one. Well, there's so many to love and so many. I mean, it's so diverse, and
yeah.
I mean, you're looking at years and years and years of just, and especially in the circumstances with like what me and you, we love rock so much. It's like what direction do we even go? Because we love so many bands, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And what I've found is that I will have, if I can go ahead and lead into our subject, we're talking about favorite bands. So what I have found is that throughout my history, I got into rock and roll at a very early age. I was about 17 years old when I actually got to hear my first rock song, and that catapulted me into this genre. And I have found that certain bands were there for me for a certain time of my life, and they kind of faded off the scene. And then I've got new bands that I'm totally into. I love listening to them. And then I've got one in particular band that has, from the beginning, has been there all the way through. And it's always been in the background, but it's always been a mainstay of, as far as like one of my favorite all-time favorites. So for me, one band that is always, when I first got started into the rock and roll industry, loving just music, all things music, is this band. And most people, you do not go through life without hearing their main song, which is Don't Stop Believing. And I'm talking about the band Journey. And if you are any familiar with that band, you know one of their top songs is Separate Ways. And that was the very first song I ever heard. My father was playing it on the car radio. We were in Florida. We didn't have, of course, Spotify. We were any familiar with it. We weren't even familiar with Pandora. And that's just put age on how old I am. But at 17, I hadn't heard any real rock songs. And Separate Ways comes on, and I'm like, what is this? I didn't know what to make of it, because I'd only ever heard like classical piano stuff with an acoustic guitar. And so stuff with distortion, stuff with a electric piano, organ, all of that synth was foreign to me. No idea. And then I hear this and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is an incredible song. Like, so much passion. And then discovering like their song Don't Stop Believing, like, it's so well known. You've heard it probably on commercials, you've heard it in TV shows, you've heard it just playing at random. There's not very many people who don't know the song, but they don't always hear of the band itself that is heard. And then of course, leading into from Journey, I was introduced to the band Survivor. Now this will put age on like the kind of music that we listen to. I listened to a lot of my father's music growing up. And so some of the newer stuff, my buddy Josh is more familiar with than I am. But a lot of the older stuff, with namely, if you haven't heard of Survivor, look up the song Eye of the Tiger. You're going to have heard that song once before in your lifetime. But that's the song they're known for. But it's not necessarily the song that I remember them for. They have like 2 songs that are just amazingly like good love songs. One, Didn't Know It Was Love. Such an amazing song. And if you haven't got to hear any of those, I advise you to listen to these. And also, if you're listening to the podcast, you're thinking of a band that is your favorite band right now, somebody you're listening to, or multiple. Like I had two that I was listening to before, once I started getting in here to the music scene. What are some of your favorite bands that you'd love to talk about? We'd love to hear about them. And if we don't know them and we haven't talked about them on the podcast, let us know, because I'd love to experience a new band, and what is it about them that makes you think they're so unique. One thing why these two bands were so unique to me, they both introduced keyboard into theirs. And I didn't think that was possible for a long time. It is, but in a lot of bands, it is very difficult sometimes to incorporate a keyboard into your band. It just depends on the kind of sound you're looking for. And so both these bands were able to do that on such an amazing level of experience. But now I'm talking a lot about these two, but Josh, give us some of your favorite bands that you've enjoyed over the years.
Just a comment real quick with when you talk about the song "Eye of the Tiger." I think it would be hard, at least for me. I could not make a rock playlist, and I've made several. I cannot make a rock playlist without that song being on it. I mean, I just wanted to plug that real quick. So yeah, that's a great song, and yeah, Survivor. They just, I mean, really on top of their game. So just like with Gavin, first when I was a little kid, got introduced to a lot of my father's music, and anybody that knows me knows how diverse my favorite rock bands are. And specifically, I was about 7 years old when I got, and this will put an age on me because people don't even use these anymore. I got my first CD player with CDs, and one of the first albums my dad got me was a Beatles album, and the album was the Beatles' #1 hits, and it had a yellow one on it, red album. And that was my dad's all-time favorite band, was the Beatles. And so I was getting into music and getting an ear for all different kinds of music. But that album specifically caught my eye to rock and roll because I mean, so many iconic songs just on that album. And that's just their #1 hits. So that right there got me to, okay, I have their greatest hits album, right? And I love it. So I want to know more about them. So when I got older, I started getting their individual albums with all their stuff on it. And then I started watching documentaries, and I knew everything about the Beatles by the time I was 8. And so since then, obviously the Beatles I had to bring them up first because they're a band that I just love and know all about, but I'm very passionate about. And also, and this will be a good subject for another time, about what all they did for rock and roll and everything, and for the future of rock music. But also, as I got older too, another band that, I mean, obviously you can't go without talking about AC/DC. I mean, AC/DC is, I mean, you could spend, you could make we could do 2 podcast shows just talking about AC/DC, right? But AC/DC, obviously, Back in Black was the first album I got by AC/DC, and then I got For Those About to Rock, and then I got their live album, AC/DC Live, and just hearing that was just, oh man, the energy, and that album's one of the albums that inspired me to want to do this for an audience someday, to perform. Wow, the energy, like just Thunderstruck when they start doing thunder, getting the crowd going, just, oh man. So the Beatles, AC/DC, and all that. But then, also going a bit forward, I discovered there's so my dad got me into the Beatles. I had an older sister that got me into bands like AC/DC and Aerosmith and all that, which I love Aerosmith a lot too. And then there was self-discovery stuff that I discovered as I got older. So one of the bands that I love so much, they were a little bit before my time, but I discovered them as I got older, was Nirvana.
Oh my goodness. Who hasn't heard Smells Like Teen Spirit, or at least heard the opening of that song? Such an incredible band. A band where a new genre, grunge rock, like who hasn't heard of that band coming up?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. When I heard Nirvana, and the I believe "Smells Like Teen Spirit" was the very first song I heard from them, and then I heard "Heart Shaped Box," and then I heard one of my all time favorite songs they do called "In Bloom," and so many songs. And one of the things that stuck out right away was Kurt Cobain. To me, his style of singing. I love his vocals. I think his vocals are they're hard to beat. I just love it. And so I got the Nevermind album, their iconic album Nevermind, and obviously that actually their song In Bloom is one of the songs from early on when I was a kid. I was like, man, I really love, because I love the drum pattern on there, and I'm like, I love the drum beat, and I'm like, man, that'd be cool to play on drums someday. So yeah, Nirvana. So I mean, I'm obviously naming off because like it's a huge spectrum, just to show that where my taste range go, and it goes everywhere. But Nirvana obviously had a huge influence on me, and then you know, and then you go back to the old school too. Another band my dad showed me in the 70s was the Eagles. And everybody's familiar with the Eagles. Obviously, Hotel California was obviously what they're most known for. But
you know what else? I think, not to stop you there, Josh, on the Eagles,
no, you're good.
They are, if I recall correctly, they have one of the Guinness records for most sold albums.
Yes, that is true.
Right next to the Thriller album by Michael Jackson. And
Yep.
so like they're, as much as maybe not a lot of people are familiar with the Eagles, depending on how they are an older band, but they're still such an incredible band. I mean, if you haven't, like Josh alluded to, Hotel California by the Beatles is such a, I mean, I believe it's on Spotify explicit for a reason. And it's not because of anything like, like off color that's being said. It's what's getting implied, because the song is such a deep and dark understanding of a certain organization that is actually going around in America. And so Hotel California is explaining and going into deep detail about such a thing. It's such an amazing song. It tells such a story. And for me, the Eagles had a way of taking you to a place.
Absolutely. Their harmonies are amazing. But I will say one of my all-time favorite guitar players, and it's one of my dad's all-time favorite guitar players too, of the Eagles, is Mr. Joe Walsh. I mean, he's an amazing guitar player. And like you alluded to with Hotel California, I mean, the whole song is great, but such a timeless song as well. A timeless song, a song that will, I mean, a song that you could play right now and just, it's like everything else around you stops, because that song is the only thing going on. Because that song just a great song, timeless song. And yeah, so they were a band, definitely another band that I give credit my father got me into, and just great stuff. And it's like you say, it's like with Hotel California, some of the things they say in it, like you can, there's a few famous quote, like, "We are all just prisoners here of our own device." And then the part where he says, I mean, I think for me, the part that always stuck out to me was, "You could check out anytime you like, but you can never leave." I just love that. And then it goes into this amazing guitar, and just, yeah. I mean, just one song, but they have a lot of great songs. But
absolutely,
obviously that's their most iconic. But yeah, and it's like how already we're starting this off. It's like there's really there's no right or wrong answer. It's just, I mean, and me and you both, and I don't want to take your thunder or anything, but me and you both, we were just talking about me and you both are inspired by the band Kiss.
Oh my
And
goodness, yes. Let's talk about these guys for a minute. So
yes.
one thing that I was kind of trying to wanted to allude into, because the Beatles were a huge inspiration on the lead singers Paul Stanley and
Mhm.
Gene Simmons, who are the two guys who they've been in the band since the beginning. They co-founded the band together, and originally the
Mhm.
idea they didn't even like each other. I mean, these two
Mhm.
guys, but what they wanted was they wanted a band that was different from other people. And if you guys have gone through, like, you don't go very far in the rock industry without hearing about Kiss. If
Mhm.
you've seen them growing up as a kid, I remember when Kiss was on almost every Dr. Pepper advertisement.
Mhm.
Gene
I remember
Simmons
that.
was everywhere. Gene Simmons always having a Dr. Pepper in hand,
Yep.
showcasing it. He's on every single billboard. I'd go through Walmart or how was it, Sam's Mart. That's like the big old grocery store. And you would go through and you'd see this big old pile of Dr. Pepper at the front, and Kiss would be
Mhm.
on the front cover of it. And I'm like, what is this? And as
Mhm.
a kid, I didn't understand what it was, but it was all about that. What they brought is they did something that they, in fact, share a little bit about this. If you ever read their documentaries, one of the ideas for the makeup actually came from another artist themselves. And they had seen going on tour, and this just shows how I didn't know how old this guy was, but Alice Cooper,
Mhm.
who is another
Mhm.
big rock guy at the time when Kiss was getting started.
Absolutely.
And what's amazing about Kiss, what I love about Kiss, and love or hate them, they have done so much in the rock and roll industry. They are the ones who
Mhm.
invented the idea of merchandising their own band. And so
Oh
whether
yeah.
or not, and I know I'm probably going to hit on a couple of people who may disagree with me. They're like, oh no, they don't like them. I know our guitarist for our own band doesn't necessarily enjoy the Ace Frehley, who is their guitarist for a long time, because a lot of his stuff he didn't write himself. But at the same time, like, these guys, they put on a show when they get on.
Mhm.
And think about what they're wearing at the time.
Mhm.
I remember seeing on them, I think it's like Gene Simmons was like, it's 40 pounds of equipment that they're wearing at any given time. They do their own makeup for every show.
Mhm.
They've never stopped doing their own makeup. Not only that, then they're carrying around this 12-pound instrument they're walking around
Mhm.
with.
Yeah.
And these guys, in some cases, they do more movement in one show at 60 plus years old
Mhm.
than some
Yeah.
guys who get up there will ever move in their life on stage.
Oh yeah.
And not only that, these guys, one thing I didn't know until I started looking up their stuff, they also for the longest time, the trend for bands to survive was 4 to 5 years at length.
Mhm.
And then they were done. And Kiss, you have this band that's been out for what, 50 plus years? They've been out. They are a testament to, and they were not liked when they first came out.
Yeah.
Everybody hated them. Their first show was what, 2 people? Their own manager didn't even want to stay. Like, he quit on as soon as the show started. And but what they showed tenacity. They overcame through all kinds of adversity, through a lot of, but what they also were able to do is they were doing things that were different from the norm at the time in the music industry. A true testament to what rock and roll does is rock and roll adapts depending on the era that it's in. And that's one of the things that they did. I mean, they found that they were better live than they were in recording. And so they did all their studio recordings live because they're like, hey, this is what people want to hear. They don't care for our studio recordings, but they love what we do live because they're showmen. And so
they're the first band I'd ever seen that I mean, they were everywhere, just like any TV show would be. Like, you know, they had their own Kiss action figures, which is awesome.
Yeah.
They had action figures. They had everything you could think of. I mean, Kiss was, I mean, they were everywhere. It's like, and I remember, like you alluded to about the Dr. Pepper. I remember that. I remember that clear as day. It's you'd see Kiss on Dr. Pepper. You'd see them, the Dr. Pepper commercial, and I mean, and you saw them everywhere. Mm-hmm. And even to this day, they're marketed everywhere. I mean,
exactly.
Kiss t-shirts to this day. Kiss t-shirts sell like hotcakes, and there's a reason for that. It's, I mean, they went from, like you said, they went from being a band that people didn't understand and didn't want to understand to being one of the most iconic bands of all time. And I mean, you see their face everywhere. The iconic tongue pose that Gene Simmons does with his tongue. I mean, just everything from that to, Paul Stanley always liked, the star. He would always represent the star, and I just all that, and I love it. And this doesn't get. I love the gimmick, and I love all of it. And I kind of talked about this on the last podcast a little bit when it comes to when they decided to get rid of the makeup for a while. They still, it was unpopular to a lot of the fans, but they wanted to show they were more than just the gimmick, more than just the cartoons, more than just the action figures. And I understand that. And you could appreciate and understand that. But it's like you said, even to this day, at the age they are, they can move around, jump around a lot better than 20-year-olds out there.
I will say this too. I don't know. I've watched, if you guys are anything, enjoy watching live, and we don't get to see a lot of live performances for bands much anymore. But what I will do is I'll go on YouTube and actually look up some of these old band performances. I saw, and I noticed this, and then we'll move on to another band because we're kind of starting to run out of time, but their Kiss will perform really well, like in their youth, they perform really well with the costumes and the stuff on. They were even more energetic without the costume and the makeup. I don't know if you've ever seen them. Like Gene and Paul are so much more energetic without the heavy duty armor and stuff. Like they showcase things that the only other band I can think of who has that kind of energy that I have seen is AC/DC. AC/DC is like the pinnacle of rock and roll. Now, I don't want to talk into some bands that have been inspired by Kiss, because I mean there is actually a band who, give or take, love or hate Ace Frehley, he actually inspired another, like he was a icon to another guy who's had an amazing career. A little rough start, but amazing career what he's built. And I'm talking about Dave Mustaine and Megadeth. Now, this one, I know this band is there's controversy all around this. Are you Metallica? Are you Megadeth? Josh, I think you and I have talked about this a couple times in the past, and we've kind of moved on past the idea of, is it Metallica or Megadeth? I'd say, why not both? Because both have their own takes on the genre they're in. And I know that's probably one thing that's going to be like, I might get stoned for that, but you know what? That's okay, because if I had to pick
for the longest time, and Metallica obviously is a man we got to talk about too. But for the longest time, I did not listen to Megadeth because everybody know I love Metallica, and then at some point, I'm like, I do have to acknowledge the good stuff that Megadeth has, because there's no denying their talent, and there's no denying that like Symphony of Destruction. I mean, how could you not love that?
Or the song, a great song, and it has a little bit of controversy to it too. I found out. Et Tu Le Monde. Et Tu Le Monde is such a deep song, and of course you're gonna go, if you got to go with Et Tu Le Monde from Megadeth, you also got to remember the Nothing Else Matters by Metallica. Two amazingly heartfelt songs with incredible guitar playing on both ends. James Hetfield and Kirk Hammett, if you've ever seen Kirk Hammett play that live, it is amazing what he can do, because I know a lot of it's one-handed too, is what he's playing. And so it's just amazing what these two can put together. And that's where I'm totally with you, like where you had to be from one or the other camp. You couldn't be both. And yet, why not? Both are incredible in their own aspects.
And my thing is, I mean, and it's okay. Everybody has their preference, right? So it's okay to prefer one or the other. But it's like you said, you can enjoy both without. Like I went through a period of time for a while to where I would hear something from Megadeth and I would think it was really awesome. But my ego, because I love Metallica so much, I wouldn't want to admit it. But now I'm way past that. I'm like, hey, look, I can acknowledge that I can still, I'm a diehard Metallica fan, but you know what? I can sit there and I can enjoy a great Megadeth album because they have a lot of things. They have a lot of great songs they brought to the table, and I can appreciate that, and I can like it, and and you know what? I can be a Megadeth fan too. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean that I love Metallica any less. It doesn't mean that I'm still not a diehard Metallica fan. I'll always be a diehard Metallica fan. But I had to finally, at some point, be like, you know what? It's okay to listen to both, and I guarantee you, James Hetfield and Dave Mustaine, neither one of them would be mad at their fans for liking both bands.
Yeah. I would have to say, too, because I think Dave Mustaine has even moved on from that. And, guys, if you're listening to one or the other, and it's because you have a feeling that you have to listen to one or the other, you're missing out. For a long time, I wouldn't listen to Metallica because...
Yeah, absolutely.
Or I wouldn't listen to Megadeth because I was thinking, oh, well, that would be... like it's their rival band. And the reality is both have incredible songs. I have songs I like from Metallica, and then I have songs I really love from Megadeth. Right now, there's a song that's in my head right now. Atulamon has been stuck in my head for the last week. And not only that, a song, if you haven't heard, it's not one of their more popular ones, but it's one I enjoy, is Angry Again by Megadeth. Such a good, it's so good, like for the feel. If anything, if you've been angry and just that frustrated, the lyrics for that chorus of that song, those will hit you like you're like, oh my gosh, I've been here.
A song that it's not one of their most popular songs, but it hadn't been out for too long. I am not certain when the year the song came out, but it's one of their newer songs, I believe. It's a song they have called "We'll Be Back," and it's what I love about this. What I love about the song by "We'll Be Back" by Megadeth. I mean, I love the whole song, the drumming and everything, but just obviously Dave Mustaine comes in just doing how he always does it. But what I love about it, just so much energy, and that song gets me pumped up. And I've been listening to that a lot recently. And and I, like you said about missing out, I realized like, man, by just limiting myself to just to Metallica because they were their rival band, I've missed out on a lot of good stuff from Megadeth. But it's like I said, nobody in Metallica would get mad at their fans for listening to Megadeth and vice versa.
Yeah.
So I think I think definitely it's like you said. I think it's not worth missing out on. They're both great, and there's so much they brought to the table, both bands.
All right, Josh, I want to talk about one more band that we have to talk about this, guys, before we're done. I think we're going to do a part 2 on this. There's so many more bands that he and I, like, if you've ever had a conversation with either of us, or you're just now meeting us for the first time, there are so many bands that we haven't even talked about. Just to name a few off, like Van Halen, Osbourne, Black Sabbath, Dio, Offspring, Green Day, Bon Jovi is one of my personal favorites. We haven't even talked about any of those bands yet, even some of the bigger bands. But there's one band that me and Josh need to talk about before we close out today. And this is the band that connects me and Josh together. It is the band that when we first got started introduced, when I found out this is a band he loved, oh man, we were both like, we talk about this band all the time. We're probably the only two in our own band that actually like this band. But there's actually a poster of it sitting in our original shed where we would rehearse. And that is the band called Black Veil Brides. If you haven't heard of them, they're a YouTube sensation. I believe their first real hit was Knives and Pins. It came out on YouTube, and it just took off. And I have to say, this is the most steroid-infused singer I have ever heard in Andy Biersack. And they are dual guitarists. I mean, Jake and Jinx are their guitarists. And they have a band, their drummer even is known by name, which Cece, I believe, is his name. But I don't want to take too much of the thunder because, Josh, like, this is a band we love. What is one of the things that stands out to you about this band and why we love it so much?
Oh, man. So with Black Veil Brides, it's always been just so many things. Like, Obviously, like you alluded to, Andy's vocals, but also just Jake and Jinx and Cece and the talent goes on and on. But their lyrical content, their music. I mean, their most popular song is a song that, of course, me and you both love, and a song that our band covers is "In the End." Amazing song, and their album. And this is an album that if we ever do a segment on albums, we got to touch on, and this will be for a future podcast, but "Wretched and Divine," Story of the Wild Ones, one of my all-time favorite, great album. But
and
anyway,
to kind of add
Veil Bride,
to what Josh is saying, why that's such a good album. One thing that Black Veil Brides did, I've never heard it done, maybe once or twice on a few albums. I believe the band Sum 41 did something like that, but they didn't like really hone into it. Is Black Veil Brides did a introduction to every song where you would hear, like, they're talking about the story of the Wild Ones, and each segment, there was like a 30-second segment where they were building up a song, and you've got to listen to it as they wrote it, because Annie has such a voice that like captivates, and so it builds up into each song. And the one for the song he was talking about, "In the End," is so beautiful because it heightens you up for what is actually on record right now. It's been on a couple of shows that I have seen on YouTube where they label like the top 50 heaviest metal songs that there are. And of course, this song is on that list every single time. Now, where its placement has always been usually is different, but it is such a song. If you haven't heard it, "In the End" by Black Veil Brides, you've got to listen to it. And Josh, there's other songs that they've done that are like, have always stand out. Like, name another one that they've done that's been so like, yes, this is why this band is between us, this is the band that we can always talk about.
"Drag Me to the Grave." I love that one.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
"Rising Up," "I'm a Fighter." The whole lyrics, just, oh man, just believing in yourself. And that's what they're all about, believing in yourself. Another one that I really love is "Set the World on Fire." Set the World on Fire.
And that is where their drummer really gets to shine in that song. It was one, and I have to confess, when I first heard this song, "Set the World on Fire," I only heard the drumming, and so my immediate mind went to, oh, this is going to be a more classical rock. I don't know if I'm interested in this. And then you get into like everything. It's just a chance for Cece to really show what he can do. And then their guitars come in, and it's such an incredible, it picks up so fast and so hard in that song.
Right. And then also, of course, and all due respect, I love the first one, but the second one's my favorite, "Savior 2."
That is a totally different take that I have seen on them. And that's one thing I love about them is rock. In order for rock to succeed, rock always has to be able to adapt and to change depending on their, like the era that they're in, and be willing to adapt. That's why bands like Metallica are still going today. They've been willing to change and adapt so much and create a new, they're not changing their sound. They're adding on to their sound. And that's one of the things that Black Veil Brides has always been able to do. And if you haven't heard "Savior 2, amazing. Like there's a multiple cello piece that's in the song. It sounds amazing. And one thing you learn about them is that one of their guitarists is classically trained as a violinist. And so some of the parts that are in the song are actually him playing, and it makes so much more sense when you get to hear that piece. And so that's just a really interesting fact. We had to talk about these guys, and there's not enough time where we could talk about all the areas of why this band is such a great band. I will say this, it's an underrated band. You do not get to hear, they don't get as much credit as they should. I know they're actually, though, on tour right now. They're celebrating their new album out, and of course they got the new song out, "Bleeders," that came out.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I believe they've got a couple new ones coming out as well. But they're on tour right now with a lot of other bands that are kind of going off the scene due to age. These guys are a band that can really like take it, because they are such a amazing, incredibly talented group of guys. They're not much older than us, and so they can keep going for years with the talent that they've got. Um, Before we close, Josh, any last remarks you'd like to say to our listeners before we end the podcast for today?
Well, I just want to say, I know this is our second episode, but for anybody that has taken the time to listen to our first podcast and this podcast, we thank you a lot. We thank anybody who's shares the passion for talking about rock, but we thank anybody who wants to listen to what we got to say about it. And it's like Gavin said at the beginning of the podcast, if there's any bands that you guys want to talk about or just please let us know. We're always open to input. We're always open for all that, but we appreciate all the listeners. And yeah, this is the best thing ever, just for us to, talk about rock. And if just one person's listening, that's amazing. So I just want to say thank you to anybody who took the time to listen to our podcast so far.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Josh. And guys, if you love the music that's at the beginning, I know it's different from the last one. What we're showcasing, you guys, is actually some of the demo tracks for the band that me and Josh are actually part of, which is Tenacity. It's also the name of the podcast. If you want to learn more about those, the song, or actually be able to hear the full version, link for it will be in the description. You can find it on all of our social media, especially even where you find the podcast you're listening to right now. You'll be able to find it on there as well. But guys, that's it for today. We want to thank you guys so much for listening, and keep on rocking in a free world, y'all. And stay tuned for what appears to be, we're going to have a part 2 of our favorite rock bands. So keep on rocking, y'all.
Peace.